She was brave, but small. The alien huntress needed my human power. The jungle air was heavy and wet, every breath tasting of earth and strange flowers. Jack pushed through thick alien vines, his boots sinking into the soft ground. He was far from home, far from any human city, and he had not seen another living soul in weeks. His scanner beeped softly in his hand, telling him the rare minerals he searched for were close. But the sound that came next froze him in place. It was not the cry of a bird, not the roar of a beast. It was a sharp, desperate scream, high and fierce. Echoing through the green shadows, Jack's head snapped toward the sound. His instincts took over before his mind could think. He began to run, his pack bouncing against his back. Branches whipped at his arms and face. Leaves brushed past him like cold fingers. The scream came again, this time shorter, strained, as if whoever made it was fighting for breath. Jack pushed harder, his legs burning. Then, suddenly, the trees opened. In the clearing ahead, a small figure darted and spun with deadly speed. She was unlike any creature Jack had seen before. Her skin was smooth and pale, with faint patterns that shimmered in the light. Her hair was a wild cascade of silver strands, and her eyes burned like molten gold. In her hands, she held a long spear tipped with dark crystal, and she was using it to keep a monstrous insect beast at bay. The beast was huge, its body armored in black plates, 6 legs tearing at the ground. Its jaws snapped with a sound like breaking stone. It lunged, and the spear flashed, striking its side. The creature screamed in rage, but the blow barely slowed it. Jack's mind raced. She was small, no taller than his shoulder, but her movements were fast, precise. Every strike was meant to kill, but the beast was simply too strong. Each time she drove it back, it came at her again, closer and closer. Without thinking, Jack dropped his scanner and pulled the compact plasma cutter from his belt. The weapon was meant for slicing through rock, but it could cut through most things. He charged forward, the ground shaking under the beast's pounding legs. The creature turned toward him at the last second, its mandibles snapping wide. Jack dove to the side, rolling across the dirt. He came up on one knee, aimed, and pulled the trigger. A burst of blue-white light seared into the beast's side. The smell of burning shell filled the air. The insect screamed, twisting toward Jack. That was its mistake. The huntress, because Jack could see now, that was what she was, took her chance. She leaped forward, driving her spear deep into a gap in its armor. The beast shuddered, legs flailing, and then it collapsed, twitching, for a long moment. There was only the sound of their breathing. Jack stood slowly, brushing dirt from his hands. The huntress pulled her spear free, her golden eyes never leaving him. They stared at each other across the body of the fallen beast. Jack opened his mouth to speak, but her expression stopped him. She was not smiling. Not grateful. She looked as if she were deciding whether to thank him or kill him. "You are human," she said at last, her voice low and careful. The way she said the word made it sound rare, almost dangerous. Jack nodded. "And you're welcome," he said. Though his voice was more cautious than friendly, she tilted her head slightly, her gaze moving over him, taking in his strange clothing, the weapon in his hand. "I did not ask for your help," she said, but there was no anger, only curiosity. Jack glanced at the dead beast. "Didn't look like you had much time to ask," he said, for the first time. Her mouth curved slightly, not quite a smile, but something close. She wiped the spearhead clean on the grass, then slung it across her back. "You fight well," she said, "for someone so large." Jack chuckled softly. "And you fight well for someone so small," he replied. The golden eyes narrowed, and he wondered if he had insulted her. But instead of replying, she turned and began walking toward the far side of the clearing. After a few steps, she stopped and looked back at him. "You should not be here, human," she said. "This is dangerous ground." Jack shrugged. "Seems like I'm not the only one who thinks so," he said, nodding toward the beast. For a moment, she studied him again, as if weighing a choice. Then she simply said, "Follow me," and without another word, the small, fierce huntress disappeared into the jungle. Jack hesitated, feeling the weight of the silence around him. Then he took a deep breath and followed, not knowing that this meeting would change everything. The jungle grew thicker as they walked, the air buzzing with unseen life. Jack kept his eyes on the huntress ahead, moving with the kind of silent grace he could never match. She never looked back, yet somehow she knew he was still following. Her spear shifted lightly on her shoulder, ready for anything. Every step felt like he was being pulled deeper into a place he was not meant to see. They passed trees with twisting roots taller than houses, flowers that closed as they walked by, and strange glowing insects drifting in the air like falling embers. Jack could hear distant howls and roars, but Lyra, he would learn her name later, moved as if nothing could touch her. He was just about to ask where they were going when the jungle opened into a small camp. It was made of woven branches and hides stretched between thick poles. The fire at its center was low, more smoke than flame. Around it, he saw trophies, bones of beasts, fangs as long as his arm, and claw marks on shields. Whoever lived here was a hunter through and through. She walked to the fire, knelt, and pulled out a leather pouch from a pack. She poured dark water into a shallow bowl, then motioned for him to sit. Jack hesitated, but his legs were tired. He lowered himself onto a flat rock across from her. For a while, they said nothing. She sipped the water slowly, eyes studying him over the rim of the bowl. Finally, she spoke. "You are far from your kind," she said. "Humans do not belong in these hunting lands. I could say the same about me finding you out there." Jack replied, "You were in trouble." Her jaw tightened for just a second. Then she set the bowl down. "I was in the middle of my hunt," she said. "That beast was not the one I sought." Jack leaned forward. "Then what are you hunting?" She hesitated, the firelight catching in her golden eyes. "A predator," she said finally. "One that has taken the lives of many from my clan." Her voice dropped lower. "It is strong, fast, and smart. It knows how to watch from the shadows. It knows fear, and how to use it." Jack frowned. "And you're going after it alone?" She shook her head. "I was, until now." There was a long silence. She looked at him, her gaze hard but not hostile. "I saw how you fought. You were strong, and your tools cut through shell and bone." She paused. "I need that power." Jack leaned back, unsure. "You're asking me to help you hunt something that killed your people?" "I am telling you," she said firmly. "Without you, I cannot win." He let out a slow breath. His mind told him to walk away, to go back to his ship and leave this world behind. But the image of her standing against the beasts, small but unyielding, stuck in his head. "What's in it for me?" he asked, half to test her. She tilted her head. "Glory among my people, and the life of one who would have died without you." He almost laughed at that. "You don't seem like the type to hand out thanks easily." Her mouth twitched. "No, I am not," she admitted, "but I repay debts, always." The fire cracked, sending sparks into the night. He thought about the danger, the odds, the fact that he had no reason to risk his life for someone he had just met, and yet, he found himself nodding. "All right," he said, "I'll help you." She didn't smile, but her eyes softened. "Then we leave at first light." She stood and walked to the edge of the camp, vanishing into the shadows to check the perimeter. Jack sat there for a while, staring into the fire, wondering if he had just made the smartest choice of his life, for the last one he would ever make. Morning on the alien world came with a sky streaked in green and gold. The air was cool, carrying the smell of wet leaves and something sharp, like metal. Jack woke to the sound of movement. Lyra was already on her feet, tightening the straps of her armor. Her spear leaned against a tree, its crystal tip catching the strange sunlight. She didn't speak at first, only tossed him a bundle of dried meat wrapped in leaves. He chewed in silence, watching her pack supplies into a small satchel. Every motion she made was efficient, purposeful, There was no wasted movement, no hesitation. He realized she had probably been preparing for this hunt long before they met, when they set out. The jungle swallowed them again. The paths here were barely more than animal trails, twisting and shifting. Jack had to duck under branches and step over roots as thick as his arm. Lyra never slowed. She moved like the forest was part of her. Her eyes flicked constantly between the ground, the shadows, and the canopy above. They stopped by a massive tree whose trunk was marked with deep, deliberate gouges. Lyra touched one of the marks with her fingers. Her voice was quiet when she spoke. The predator was here 2 nights ago. It leaves these as warnings, to scare other hunters away. Jack studied the marks. Each one was bigger than his hand, and the depth made it clear whatever made them was powerful. He felt a shiver crawl up his spine. And you think we can take it? Lyra glanced at him. I know we must. They moved on, climbing over rocks slick with moss and crossing streams where silver fish darted like flashes of light. Every now and then, Lyra would stop, crouch, and study the ground. Jack didn't see anything, but she would point to a broken leaf, a faint trail of disturbed soil, or a claw print barely visible in the mud. She was tracking something that didn't want to be found. By midday, they reached a ridge that overlooked a deep valley. From here, Jack could see twisted trees, pools of dark water, and shadows that moved even when the wind was still. Lyra's voice was almost a whisper. This is where it hunts most often. Once we go down there, it will know we are here. Jack tightened the strap on his cutter. So what's the plan? She gave a faint smile. We find it before it finds us. They descended slowly, the air growing heavier. Sounds were muffled here, as if the jungle itself was holding its breath. Jack felt eyes on him, though he saw nothing. Once, he caught a flicker of movement in the corner of his visions, something large slipping between the trees, but when he turned, there was only stillness. They reached a small clearing where the ground was torn up. Lyra knelt and touched the dirt. Her fingers came away stained red. Jack recognized the smell instantly. Blood, fresh, before he could speak. A low rumble rolled through the air. It wasn't like the roar of the beast from yesterday. This was deeper, more controlled, almost like a warning. Lyra's hand tightened on her spear. Her eyes locked on the shadows ahead. It knows we are here, she said quietly. Jack scanned the trees, his heartbeat thudding in his ears. He didn't see it, but he could feel it, something huge, something intelligent, watching them from just beyond the edge of sight. Lyra didn't move. She stood like a statue, her gaze fixed, her body tense. Jack realized she was listening, waiting for the exact moment to strike. The silence stretched, every second feeling longer than the last. Then, somewhere in the shadows, a single branch cracked. The crack of the branch echoed like a gunshot in the still jungle. Jack's grip tightened on his cutter, his eyes darting through the thick shadows. Lyra didn't move, her golden eyes fixed on a point in the darkness. Then, without warning, she spun and hurled her spear. The weapon vanished into the trees with a sharp hiss, followed by an inhuman roar that rattled the leaves. Something massive burst from the undergrowth. Its body was a blur of muscle and armored plates, taller than Jack and longer than 3 men. Its head was shaped like a jagged blade, its eyes black and empty. The air filled with the stench of blood and rot. Jack fired his cutter, the beam slicing across its side. But the creature didn't slow. It barreled toward them with terrifying speed. Lyra rolled to the left, snatching her spear from where it had embedded in a tree. Jack dove the other way, narrowly missing the swipe of a claw that gouged a trench into the ground. The beast's roar shook his chest. It moved faster than anything its size should. Each lunge was precise, each strike meant to kill. Lyra darted in and out, stabbing at its joints, but it turned on her with sudden, deadly focus. Jack saw her stumble as a root caught her foot. The predator lunged, jaws opening wide. Jack didn't think he charged, slamming into its side with all his weight. The impact sent both of them crashing into a tangle of vines. The beast twisted violently, throwing him off like a rag doll. He hit the ground hard, The breath knocked from his lungs. Lyra was already moving. Her spear flashing in the dim light, she struck deep into the creature's shoulder. It howled, jerking back, black blood spraying across the ground. For a heartbeat, Jack thought they had it. But then another roar sounded from deeper in the jungle. Low and distant, Lyra's eyes widened. "There's more than one," she shouted. The second predator emerged from the shadows, slightly smaller but no less deadly. It circled to flank them, its movements eerily coordinated with the first. Jack scrambled to his feet, heart pounding. Two of them, they couldn't fight both, head-on up the ridge. Lyra barked, already moving. Jack followed, firing bursts from his cutter to force the creatures back. The predators chased, their roars blending into one long, bone-shaking sound. Vines whipped against his face as they ran, the ground uneven. Beneath his boots, they reached a fallen tree, spanning a narrow ravine. Lyra didn't hesitate, sprinting across the slick surface. Jack followed, the wood creaking under his weight. The predators lunged behind them, claws scraping, snapping jaws. Only a breath away, Lyra reached the far side and spun, her spear raised. "Cut it," she yelled. Jack understood instantly. He turned, aimed at the base of the tree, and fired. The plasma beam burned through the trunk. The massive log shuddered, then collapsed, crashing into the ravine below. The predators tumbled with it. There, roars fading into the depths. Jack stood there, chest heaving, sweat mixing with the damp jungle air. Lyra lowered her spear, her breathing steady, but her eyes still sharp, scanning the trees. "They will climb out," she said. "We bought time, not safety." Jack wiped his face and glanced at her. "You weren't kidding about dangerous ground." Her lips curved just slightly. "Now you understand why I needed you," she said. Then, without another word, she turned and started deeper into the jungle, as if the fight had been nothing more than a delay. Jack followed, his mind spinning with the realization that this hunt was far from over. The jungle seemed quieter after the fight, but Jack knew it was a lie. Silence here was never safety, only the pause before something worse. Lyra led the way, her steps quick and sure. She didn't speak, and Jack didn't ask questions. He could feel her focus, like an invisible thread pulling them forward. They followed the ridge for hours, moving deeper into a part of the forest where the light barely touched the ground. The air was thicker here, filled with the scent of damp earth and something faintly metallic. Every now and then, Jack caught glimpses of movement high in the canopus shapes that vanished before he could get a clear look. Lyra stopped suddenly, crouching low. She brushed her fingers over the dirt, then held them up for him to see. They were smeared with dark, almost black blood, still wet, wounded. She whispered, "One of them is close." They moved slower now, every step deliberate. Jack kept his cutter in his hands, its weight oddly comforting. Lyra's eyes flicked constantly between the shadows and the ground. Her whole body seemed coiled like a spring, ready to strike. A low rustling came from ahead, followed by the faint sound of breathing deep, ragged, and angry. Lyra motioned for him to stay back, then crept forward. Jack followed a few steps behind, careful to avoid snapping twigs. They reached a small hollow, surrounded by twisted roots. There, in the shadows, the predator crouched, its massive body tense. Its side was torn where Lyra's spear had struck, black blood pooling beneath it. Its head turned slowly toward them, and in its eyes, Jack saw recognition. Lyra moved first, lunging with her spear. The predator reacted with shocking speed for its size, rolling to the side and snapping at her with its jaws. Jack fired his cutter, the beam grazing its flank. The creature roared, the sound vibrating through Jack's bones. It didn't charge, not yet. Instead, it backed into the shadows, watching them. Its breathing was heavy but controlled. Jack realized it was waiting for something. A cold wind stirred the leaves above, and Jack felt the fine hairs on his neck rise. He turned, scanning the trees. That was when he saw its three glowing eyes peering from the darkness. Higher up, watching another predator, smaller than the others, but with a lean, dangerous grace. It was positioned perfectly to trap them. "They're learning," Jack muttered under his breath. Lyra's jaw tightened. "They've always known," she said. "We are in their hunting ground, and now they are hunting us." Before Jack could reply, the second predator dropped from the trees, landing with a thud that shook the ground. It snarled, and the wounded one answered with a growl of its own. Closing the space between them, the two began to circle, moving in perfect sync. Lyra's spear twitched in her grip. "We can't kill both here," she whispered. "We draw them out." Jack didn't like the sound of that, but he followed as she darted sideways through a narrow gap between the roots. The predators lunged after them, their roars echoing through the hollow. Jack felt the ground shake under each of their steps, branches snapping as they crashed through the jungle. The chase drove them downhill into a tangle of vines and moss-covered stones. The air grew cooler, and Jack realized they were heading toward the mouth of a cave. Lyra didn't slow. She dove inside, her voice sharp. "In here." Jack followed, his boots slipping on the wet stone. The predators roared behind them, the sound now thunder in the narrow space. Lyra grabbed his arm and yanked him into a side tunnel, just as the first creature's head forced its way into the entrance. Its jaws snapped inches from Jack's leg. They pressed themselves against the cold rock, breathing hard. The predator's snarl echoed through the cave, but it couldn't fit all the way inside. For now, they were safe. But Jack knew it wouldn't last. He glanced at Lyra, who was staring deeper into the darkness. Her eyes were sharp. But there was something else. There's something that told him she had a plan, one he might not like. The cave was cold and damp, the air heavy with the scent of stone and something ancient. Jack's breath came in slow clouds as he tried to calm his racing heart. Outside, the predators prowled, their claws scraping against the rock, low growls rumbling like distant thunder. Lyra stood still, her head tilted as if listening to the cave itself. Without looking at him, she whispered, "This place is older than my people. The ground here hides rivers, and the walls hide death." Jack didn't like the sound of that. "What do you mean?" Her gaze slid to him, sharp and unreadable. "I mean, if we are clever, this place will kill them for us." She moved deeper into the tunnel, her steps light despite the uneven stone. Jack followed, the faint glow from the cave mouth fading until they were swallowed by darkness. Lyra lit a small vial that spilled green light across the walls. Strange symbols, carved and worn by time, seemed to shift when Jack looked too long. They reached a cavern where water dripped steadily from the ceiling into a wide black pool. The air here was colder still. Lyra pointed to the ceiling above the pool, where jagged rocks hung like teeth. "A quake shattered this chamber long ago," she murmured. "The stone above is loose. One push and it falls." Jack understood. "You want to lure them in." Her golden eyes glinted. "Exactly." The plan came together quickly. They returned to the cave mouth, Lyra stepping just far enough into view to let the predators see her. She let out a sharp cry, the sound bouncing off the stone. The first predator surged forward, forcing its bulk through the narrow opening. The second followed, their combined roars filling the air. Lyra sprinted back, toward the pool, her small frame darting between stone pillars. Jack waited in the shadows, near the wall, cutter ready, as the predators thundered into the chamber. Their weight made the ground tremble. Dust drifted from the ceiling. "Now!" Lyra shouted. Jack aimed his cutter at the largest crack above the pool and fired. The beam cut through the weakened stone, and with a deafening roar, the ceiling gave way. Huge slabs of rock crashed down, smashing into the water. The shockwave sent icy spray across the cavern. One predator was crushed instantly, its body vanishing beneath the rubble. The other tried to leap clear, but Lyra was already there, her spear flashing. She drove the blade deep into its chest, black blood spilling onto the stone. It gave one last shuddering roar before collapsing beside the pool. Silence followed, broken only by the drip of water. Jack's pulse hammered in his ears. Lyra stood over the fallen predator, her shoulders rising and falling slowly. She pulled her spear free and looked at him. "Two down," she said softly, "but the one we came for is still alive." Jack stared at her, the reality sinking in. That wasn't the Alpha. Her expression darkened. "No," she said, her voice low. "The one we seek is older, stronger, and it knows we're coming." She turned toward a narrow tunnel leading deeper underground, the faint green glow painting her face. "Rest while you can, human," she murmured. "The real hunt begins now." The tunnel narrowed until Jack had to turn sideways to squeeze through. His shoulders scraped the cold stone, and every sound seemed louder. Hear the drip of water, the crunch of gravel underfoot, the low hum of something alive in the dark. Lyra moved ahead without hesitation, her small frame slipping through gaps he struggled to pass. The green glow from her vial painted the walls like veins of light. They emerged into a vast chamber that seemed impossibly large for the space beneath. The jungle stalactites hung like spears from the ceiling, and the ground was uneven, littered with bones. Some were small, others far too big. Jack's breath caught when he saw a skull larger than his torso. Its surface was scored with deep claw marks. Lyra raised her spear slowly, her voice a whisper. "This is its den." The silence was thick, oppressive, every instinct in Jack's body screamed at him to leave, but then he heard it, a slow, deliberate scrape of claws against stone. The sound came from the shadows at the far end of the chamber. A pair of eyes glowed faintly, reflecting the green light. They were higher than he expected, much higher. The Alpha stepped forward, and Jack's gut clenched. It was massive, easily twice the size of the others, its armor plates thicker, darker. The scars across its face spoke of countless battles survived. It didn't roar like the others, it simply stared at them, and in that gaze was intelligence. Lyra moved first, darting to the side to draw its attention. The Alpha tracked her with unnerving precision. Jack fired his cutter, the beam striking its flank. The creature barely flinched before lunging toward him. Jack dove behind a boulder as claws smashed into the stone, sending shards flying. Lyra struck from behind, her spear slicing across the creature's hind leg. It turned with startling speed, its tail whipping through the air like a blade. The blow caught her in the side, knocking her hard against the wall. Jack's heart lurched as she slid to the ground, gasping for breath. Without thinking, he ran forward, yelling to draw the Alpha's focus. It worked too well. The predator charged, the ground trembling under its weight. Jack waited until the last moment, then dove to the side. Firing his cutter into a crack in the ceiling above, chunks of rock fell, forcing the creature back, but not stopping it. Lyra was on her feet again, blood on her lips but her eyes burning with fire. "Together," she shouted. She rushed in from one side as Jack came from the other. The Alpha lashed out, claws slicing the air between them. Jack rolled under its swing, jamming the cutter into a gap in its armor, and firing at full power. The smell of burning shell filled the chamber. The predator screamed, twisting toward him. But Lyra was already leaping. She drove her spear down into the base of its skull with all her strength. The crystal tip punched through, the glow in its eyes flickering. The Alpha gave one final, shuddering roar, before collapsing to the stone floor. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Jack's chest heaved as he stared at the fallen beast. Lyra pulled her spear free, her breathing ragged. Then she looked at him, her golden eyes softer than he had ever seen. "You fought like one of my own," she said quietly. "No, better." Jack gave a tired smile. "And you're a lot stronger than you look." Her lips curved, not quite a smile but close. "I told you, human, I needed your power," she said. "But now I think you needed mine just as much." They stood there in the fading green glow, surrounded by the bones of the hunt, knowing the jungle above would never feel the same again. And somewhere, deep in the dark, the echo of their victory seemed to linger.